The Vigilant Horizon, a sleek and formidable Zealary scout ship, drifted silently through the vast emptiness of space. Its dark, angular hull reflected the faint light of distant stars as it glided near the borders of human-controlled territory. For the Zealary, this was routine, a simple reconnaissance mission to observe the movements of a species they had long considered insignificant. The Zealary were a proud and ancient race, their reptilian forms exuding an air of dominance. Their culture was steeped in war, conquest, and strategy, and they viewed humanity as little more than an impulsive, chaotic species, reckless children playing with fire. To the Zealary, humans were unpredictable and primitive, their wars and rapid technological progress seen as the erratic flailing of a species unworthy of serious attention. But as the Vigilant Horizon approached the edge of human space, its scanners picked up something unusual. Deep in the void, a massive structure loomed, a human warship, far larger than anything the Zealary had encountered before. The ship's designation blinked on their displays, Resolute. At first, the crew dismissed it as another crude human creation. But as their scanners probed deeper, unease crept into the control room. The Resolute was no ordinary vessel. Its hull was an enigma, constructed from an exotic material that seemed to absorb and dissipate energy. It shimmered faintly, as if alive, and the Zealary's sensors struggled to fully analyze its composition. Commander Thalvac, a seasoned veteran with scales the color of burnished bronze, leaned forward in his command chair, his yellow eyes narrowing as he analyzed the data. The ship radiated power, its design a stark departure from humanity's earlier clunky and inefficient war machines. This was something new. The weapons systems of the Resolute sent a chill through the Zealary crew. Hypervelocity rail cannons capable of firing projectiles at near light speeds lined its hull, each one a potential death sentence for any ship caught in its sights. Particle disruptors, weapons that could destabilize matter at a fundamental level, pulsed ominously in their mounts. And then there were the missiles, thousands of them, each equipped with warheads that, according to the scans, could tear apart the very fabric of space. But what truly unsettled the Zealary were the secondary systems. The scanners revealed swarms of autonomous combat drones, small but deadly machines designed to infiltrate and destroy enemy ships from within. Molecular disintegration nanites were also detected, tiny machines capable of breaking down both flesh and metal into nothingness. And then there were the revenants. Thalvac's claws tightened around the armrests of his chair as the data on the revenants scrolled across the display. These were no ordinary soldiers. The scans suggested they were cybernetic monstrosities once human, now transformed into relentless killing machines. Their bodies were heavily augmented with weapons, their minds likely stripped of fear or hesitation. They were designed for one purpose, to annihilate anything in their path. The bridge of the Vigilant Horizon was silent, the usual hum of activity replaced by a tense stillness. The Zealary crew, hardened warriors who had seen countless battles, shifted uneasily in their seats. This ship wasn't just a war machine, it was a nightmare given form. "Commander," one of the officers said, his voice tight with unease. "We should leave. Now." Thalvac nodded, his spines flattening against his neck in agreement. "Activate the stealth field. Pull us back slowly. Do not provoke them." The ship began to retreat, its engines humming softly as it turned away from the Resolute. But before they could fully disengage, an alert blared across the bridge. "Commander," another officer said, panic creeping into his tone. "They've detected us." A ripple of energy pulsed across the Resolute's hull, and a transmission cut through the silence. The voice that spoke was cold and mechanical, devoid of emotion yet unmistakably human. "Unidentified vessel," it said, each word sharp and deliberate. "You have entered restricted Terran space. State your purpose immediately." The crew froze. No species had ever detected a Zealary ship before, not with their advanced cloaking technology. The realization that the humans had seen through their stealth systems sent a wave of fear through the bridge. Thalvak swallowed hard, forcing his spines to lie flat as he motioned for the communications officer to respond. His voice, usually commanding and firm, carried a slight tremor as he spoke. "This is Commander Thalvak of the Zealary Dominion. We mean no harm. We were conducting a routine survey." There was a long silence, the kind that stretched and coiled like a predator waiting to strike. Then the voice returned, colder than before. "Leave," it said. "And remember, this is our territory." The transmission ended abruptly, and the bridge was plunged into an oppressive quiet. Thalvak exhaled slowly, his claws digging into the armrests as he barked orders. "Full retreat. Now." The vigilant horizon spun away, its engines flaring as it accelerated into the void. Behind them, the Resolute remained motionless, its dark silhouette a menacing reminder of the power humanity now wielded. As the Zealary ship disappeared into the safety of hyperspace, Thalvak couldn't shake the feeling that they had just witnessed the birth of something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Humanity was no longer the reckless, primitive species they had dismissed. They were something else entirely. Commander Thalvak sat alone in his quarters aboard the vigilant horizon, his scaled hands trembling slightly as he activated the encrypted communication console. The dim light of the room cast long shadows across the walls, and the faint hum of the ship's engines was the only sound accompanying him. His golden eyes, usually sharp and unwavering, now flickered with unease. The image of the Resolute lingered in his mind, vivid and oppressive. It wasn't just the ship's size or its overwhelming arsenal that haunted him, it was the sheer purpose it radiated. That vessel wasn't built for posturing or defense. It was a weapon of annihilation, a fortress designed for a war that defied comprehension. Thalvak's claws tapped against the console as he began his report. His voice was steady, but there was a weight to his words, a gravity that betrayed his fear. "To the High Command of the Zealary Dominion," he began, his tone formal yet urgent. "I have encountered a Terran warship at the edge of their territory. It is unlike anything we have seen before. Its size, its capabilities, its intent. It is clear that humanity has advanced far beyond our previous assessments. This ship, the Resolute, is not a defensive vessel. It is a harbinger of something far greater. I urge the Council to convene immediately. This cannot be ignored." He hesitated for a moment, his claw hovering over the transmission button. A part of him wondered if the Council would even listen. The Zealary had always dismissed humanity as a minor annoyance, a species too reckless and disorganized to pose a real threat. But Thalvak knew what he had seen. He knew that ignoring this warning would be a mistake they might not survive. With a deep breath, he sent a message. The console emitted a soft chime, and the transmission vanished into the void, encrypted and secure. Thalvak leaned back in his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. For the first time in years, he felt truly powerless. Days later, the Zealary Council convened in the grand chamber of the Dominion's capital. The room was vast, its walls adorned with ancient carvings depicting the Zealary's long history of conquest and dominance. The air was heavy with the scent of incense, a tradition meant to calm the minds of those present. The council members, a mix of elder statesmen and military generals, sat in a circular formation. Their scales shimmered under the chamber's golden light, but their expressions were cold and dismissive. Thalvak stood in the center of the room, his posture rigid as he addressed them. "My lords," he began, his voice firm but respectful. "I bring a warning of grave importance. Humanity is no longer the species we once knew. The ship I encountered, the Resolute, is a fortress of war, unlike anything in our fleets. Its weapons, its defenses, its design. It is clear that the Terrans have been preparing for something. Something we do not understand. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some of the elders exchanged skeptical glances, their ridged brows furrowing. One of them, an older Zealary with scales dulled by age, leaned forward and spoke. "Commander Thalvak, we have heard tales of human ingenuity before. They are a resourceful species, yes, but reckless. Their advancements are often short-lived, their strategies chaotic. Why should we believe this is any different?" Thalvak's spines bristled slightly, but he suppressed his frustration. "With respect, Elder, this is not the result of chaos. This ship was built with purpose. Its design is deliberate, its capabilities far beyond what we anticipated. I do not believe this is merely a show of strength. Humanity is preparing for a war, one that we are not ready for." Another council member, a general with dark emerald scales, scoffed. "And who, Commander, do you think they are preparing to fight? Us? The Galactic Concord? The Terrans have always been paranoid, building weapons to defend themselves from imagined threats. This is no different." Thalvak stepped forward, his voice rising with urgency. "No, General. This is different. The Resolute is not a defensive ship. Its weapons are designed for destruction on a scale we cannot match. And its secondary systems, autonomous drones, molecular disintegration nanites, cybernetic soldiers, they are tools of total war. This is not paranoia. This is preparation for something far greater." The chamber fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Thalvak could see the doubt in their eyes, the reluctance to believe that humanity could pose a real threat. But he also saw something else, a flicker of fear, buried deep beneath their pride. Finally, the Grand Chancellor, a towering figure with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian, raised a hand to silence the murmurs. His voice was calm, yet commanding. "Commander Thalvak," he said, his golden eyes locking onto the younger Zealary. "You have presented your case with conviction. But we cannot act on fear alone. If what you say is true, then humanity's rapid militarization may indeed hide a deeper secret. We must know the truth before we decide our course of action." The Chancellor leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "You will return to human space. Observe them. Gather evidence. If there is more to this than we understand, you will find it. But until then, this council will not act on speculation." Thalvak bowed his head, though his jaw tightened with frustration. "As you command, Grand Chancellor." As he left the chamber, the weight of their decision pressed heavily on his shoulders. He knew the council's pride blinded them, their arrogance preventing them from seeing the true danger that humanity now represented. But Thalvak couldn't shake the feeling that the Resolute was only the beginning. Whatever humanity was preparing for, it was something that terrified even them. And if the Zealary didn't act soon, it might be too late to stop it. He returned to the vigilant horizon, his mind racing with questions. What was humanity hiding? What enemy could drive them to create such monstrous weapons? And most importantly, would the Zealary be ready when the truth was finally revealed? As the ship prepared to depart, Thalvak stared out at the stars, his claws clenched tightly at his sides. Somewhere out there, the answers awaited. But he couldn't shake the sense of dread that had taken root in his heart. The galaxy was changing, and Thalvak feared that the Zealary were already too late to keep up. The void of space stretched endlessly before the vigilant horizon, its dark expanse broken only by the faint shimmer of distant stars. Commander Thalvak sat in a dimly lit observation chamber, his mind a storm of questions that refused to settle. The deeper his investigation into humanity's actions took him, the more disturbing the patterns became. Over the past century, humanity had undergone a transformation that defied logic. Their technological advancements were nothing short of miraculous, leaping forward in ways that no other species in the galaxy had ever achieved. The Zealari had always prided themselves on their technological superiority, their advancements the result of millennia of refinement and conquest. Yet humanity, in the blink of an eye, had surpassed even the most advanced civilizations in certain areas. Thalvak's claws tapped rhythmically against the armrest of his chair as he reviewed the data. Their fleet had grown exponentially, their ships bristling with weapons and defenses that seemed almost over-engineered. And yet, despite this rapid militarization, humanity had stopped expanding their territory. This was the strangest anomaly of all. For centuries, humans had been explorers, colonizers, pushing the boundaries of what was known. They had always sought to claim more, to spread their influence across the stars. But now, they were retreating inward, fortifying their borders with an intensity that bordered on paranoia. It was as though they were preparing not to conquer, but to defend. Thalvak leaned forward, his golden eyes narrowing as he studied the patterns of their defensive installations. Massive orbital platforms bristled with weapons, positioned at every strategic point along their borders. Entire planets had been transformed into fortresses, their surfaces covered in shield generators and missile silos. It was clear that humanity was preparing for war, but not with the Zealari or the Galactic Concord. The realization gnawed at him, a growing sense of unease that he couldn't shake. Humanity wasn't acting like a predator preparing for conquest. They were acting like prey, cornered and desperate, building walls against an unseen threat. It was during one of his late-night reviews of classified Zealari intelligence that Thalvak stumbled upon the first piece of the puzzle. The file was buried deep within the Dominion's archives, its access restricted to only the highest levels of command. But Thalvak's position as a scout commander granted him certain privileges, and his curiosity pushed him to dig deeper. The report detailed a discovery made decades ago, far beyond the borders of known space. A Zealari exploration vessel, the Eternal Flame, had stumbled upon a debris field in a remote, uncharted region of the galaxy. The wreckage was ancient, its surface scarred and pitted from untold millennia adrift in the void. The fragments belonged to ships, but they were unlike anything the Zealari or anyone else had ever seen. Even in their ruined state, the vessels were massive, dwarfing the largest warships in existence. Their designs were alien, their purpose unknowable. Some pieces bore strange, intricate carvings, while others radiated faint traces of energy, as though some remnant of their creators still lingered within. Thalvak's claws tightened around the edges of the data pad as he read on. The energy signatures were faint, almost imperceptible, but they were there. Something was still alive or active within the wreckage. The Eternal Flame's crew had attempted to investigate further, but their sensors had malfunctioned, their readings scrambled by an unknown interference. Shortly after, the ship had been ordered to withdraw, and the area was marked as restricted space. The report ended with a chilling conclusion: whatever had created those ships was far beyond anything the galaxy had ever encountered. The Zealari High Command had dismissed the findings as irrelevant, a relic of a long-dead civilization. But Thalvak couldn't ignore the implications. He stared out at the stars, his mind racing. The pieces were beginning to fall into place, and the picture they painted was more terrifying than he had imagined. The Resolute, with its monstrous weapons and impenetrable defenses, wasn't built to fight the Zealari or the Galactic Concord. It was built for something else, something that had left those ancient ships in ruins. Thalvak's scales prickled as a cold realization settled over him. Humanity had found the wreckage. They had seen what the Zealari had dismissed, and they had understood the threat it represented. Their rapid technological advancements, their militarization, Their retreat into fortified borders, it all pointed to one undeniable truth. They were preparing for the return of something ancient. Something powerful. Something that could destroy them all. Thalvek's breath quickened as he returned to the bridge of the vigilant horizon. The crew looked up as he entered, their expressions tense. They could sense his unease, the weight of whatever he had discovered. "Set a course for the restricted zone," he ordered, his voice steady but firm. "We need to see it for ourselves." The officers exchanged uncertain glances, but none dared to question him. The ship's engines hummed to life, and the stars outside the viewport began to blur as they entered hyperspace. As the vigilant horizon hurtled toward the unknown, Thalvek couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a nightmare. The wreckage, the Resolute, humanity's frantic preparations, it all pointed to a single, horrifying conclusion. Something was coming. Something ancient and hungry, that had once brought destruction to the galaxy on a scale unimaginable. And now, it was stirring again. For the first time in his life, Thalvek felt truly small, a mere speck in the vast, uncaring cosmos. Whatever humanity had seen, whatever they were preparing for, it was something far beyond the Zealari's understanding. And as the stars streaked past the viewport, Thalvek couldn't help but wonder if they were already too late. The shuttle glided silently through the cold void of human space, its hull cloaked in stealth technology. Thalvek sat in a dim cockpit, his golden eyes fixed on the distant silhouette of the Resolute. The massive vessel loomed like a dark monolith against the stars, its jagged edges and angular design exuding an almost predatory presence. It was a ship built for war, but as Thalvek stared at it, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was also a shield, a desperate bulwark against something far worse. The Zealary commander's mind churned with unease as his shuttle approached the docking bay. He had taken a great risk coming here, venturing into human space without the Council's approval. If the humans decided to capture or kill him, there would be no rescue, no reprieve. But the questions burning in his mind left him no choice. The docking clamps engaged with a metallic hiss, and the shuttle shuddered as it came to a halt. Thalvek rose from his seat, straightening his posture as the airlocks cycled open. A group of Terran soldiers stood waiting, their faces hidden behind sleek helmets. Their weapons, though not raised, were held with practiced ease, a silent warning. "Commander Thalvek," one of them said, his voice filtered through his helmet. "Admiral Ward has agreed to meet with you. Follow us." Thalvek nodded, his expression unreadable. He followed the soldiers through the stark, utilitarian corridors of the Resolute, the air heavy with the scent of metal and ozone. The walls seemed to hum with barely contained energy, a faint reminder of the ship's immense power. They led him to a large, circular chamber, its walls lined with glowing tactical displays. At the center of the room stood Admiral Elias Ward. He was a tall man, his presence commanding despite the streaks of gray in his hair. His sharp blue eyes locked onto Thalvek as he entered, studying him with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. "Commander," Ward said, his voice calm but firm. "You've come a long way for this meeting. I assume it's important." Thalvek stepped forward, his movements deliberate. "It is. And I appreciate you agreeing to see me, Admiral." Ward crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "I'll admit, I'm curious. The Zealary are known for their diplomacy, especially when it comes to humanity. So tell me, why are you here?" Thalvek's gaze didn't waver. "Because I know you're hiding something. I've seen the Resolute. I've studied your defenses. Humanity isn't preparing for war with the Zealary or the Galactic Concord. You're preparing for something else. Something far worse." For a moment, silence filled the room. Ward's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing as he studied the Zealary commander. The tension was palpable, like the stillness before a storm. "You're bold, I'll give you that," Ward said finally, his tone guarded. "But you're also walking a dangerous line, Commander. What makes you think you know anything about what humanity is preparing for?" Thalvak took a step closer, his voice low but firm. "Because I've seen the reports. The ancient wreckage in uncharted space. The faint energy signatures. I know humanity found something out there, something that terrified you. And now, you're building ships like the Resolute to fight it. So tell me, Admiral, what are you preparing for?" Ward's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed as though he might order Thalvak to leave. But then, something shifted in his expression. The suspicion gave way to something deeper: weariness, and perhaps even fear. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You're right," he said quietly. "We are hiding something. But not because we want to. Because we have to." Thalvak's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Ward gestured for him to sit, and though the Zealary hesitated, he eventually complied. The Admiral leaned against the edge of the table, his gaze distant as he began to speak. 70 years ago, Ward began, his voice heavy, humanity picked up strange signals coming from deep space. They were faint, almost like whispers, but they didn't match anything we'd ever encountered. We sent out probes, then manned expeditions to investigate. That's when we found the wreckage. Thalvak leaned forward slightly, his spines bristling with unease. "The wreckage of the ancient ships?" Ward nodded. "Yes. They were massive, larger than anything we'd ever seen. Their designs were alien, even to us. But what we found wasn't just a graveyard. There was something else. Faint energy readings, scattered across the debris field. It was like the wreckage was alive, in a way. Or at least, something within it was." The Zealary commander's claws tapped against the edge of his seat. "And what did you find?" Ward's expression darkened. "We found traces of a civilization that had been wiped out. Entire fleets, entire worlds, destroyed by something we couldn't understand. The more we studied the wreckage, the more we realized that whatever had done this wasn't just powerful, it was deliberate. Precise. It didn't just destroy, it erased." Thalvak felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you call it?" Ward's gaze met his, and for the first time, Thalvak saw a flicker of fear in the human's eyes. "We call it the Voidborn. We don't know what it is, whether it's a species, a force of nature, or something else entirely. But we know it's still out there. The signals we picked up, they weren't just echoes of the past. They were warnings." The room seemed to grow colder, the weight of Ward's words settling heavily between them. Thalvak's mind raced, trying to comprehend the implications. "And the Resolute?" he asked. "Your fleets? Your fortifications?" Ward straightened, his voice steady but grim. "They are not for you, or the Concorde, or anyone else in this galaxy. They are for them. Every ship we build, every weapon we develop, it's all to prepare for the day they return. Because make no mistake, Commander, they will return. And when they do, it won't just be humanity that's at risk. It'll be everyone." Thalvak sat back, his claws gripping the armrests of his chair. The pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place, but the picture they formed was more horrifying than he could have imagined. The Zealary had dismissed humanity's actions as paranoia, but now he saw the truth. Humanity wasn't paranoid. They were the only ones who truly understood the danger. As the silence stretched between them, Ward spoke again, his voice low. "You wanted to know what we're hiding, Commander. Now you do. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Thalvak didn't answer immediately. His mind was too consumed by the revelation, by the enormity of the threat that loomed over them all. The Voidborn were coming, and the galaxy was woefully unprepared. Finally, he stood, his posture rigid. I don't know, he admitted. But I do know this: if what you've told me is true, then the Zealary Dominion has been blind for far too long. And if we don't open our eyes soon, it won't just be humanity that suffers. Ward nodded, his expression grim. Then let's hope you can make them see, Commander. Because time is running out. As Thalvak left the chamber, the weight of the truth pressed heavily on his shoulders. The galaxy wasn't ready for what was coming. And deep down, he feared it never would be. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of a massive display screen that dominated one wall. Thalvak stood in a shadowy silence, his golden eyes fixed on Admiral Ward, who stood beside him. The human's face was grim, his shoulders tense as though he carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. This, Ward said quietly, his voice heavy with a mixture of dread and resignation, is what we're up against. With a press of a button, the screen flickered to life. At first, there was only static, a faint crackle like distant whispers in the void. Then, the image sharpened, and Thalvak's breath caught in his throat. The footage was grainy, recorded from the bridge of a human battleship. The camera shook as alarms blared in the background, the voices of panicked crew members rising in a chaotic chorus. Beyond the viewport, the blackness of space seemed alive, shifting and writhing as though the void itself had taken form. And then it emerged. A colossal entity drifted into view, its sheer size dwarfing the human ships that surrounded it. Its surface was a grotesque blend of organic and mechanical, a nightmare of churning flesh and glistening metal. Pulsing veins of bioluminescent light ran across its hull, casting an eerie glow that seemed to seep into the darkness around it. Its shape was ever-changing, shifting with a terrible fluidity that defied logic. Thalvak's spines bristled as he stared at the creature. It was alive, yet not alive in any way he understood. It moved with a deliberate, predatory grace, its many appendages curling and unfurling like the limbs of some ancient sea monster. What is that? Thalvak whispered, his voice barely audible. Ward's expression hardened. That, he said, is a Voidborn. The footage continued, and Thalvak watched in horror as the human fleet opened fire. Beams of energy and volleys of missiles streaked through the void, slamming into the creature's massive form. For a moment, it seemed as though the attacks were having an effect. Parts of its surface shattered, spilling a dark, viscous fluid into space. But then, the Voidborn began to change. Its wounds closed with unnatural speed, the damaged sections of its body twisting and reforming into something new. The weapons that had struck it were now part of its flesh, their designs assimilated and repurposed. The creature's glowing veins pulsed brighter, and with a sudden, violent motion, it unleashed a wave of energy that tore through the human fleet like paper. Thalvak flinched as the screen filled with light, the cries of the doomed crew echoing in his ears. When the image cleared, all that remained of the fleet were shattered hulls and drifting debris. The Voidborn moved through the wreckage like a vulture, its tendrils reaching out to absorb the remnants of the destroyed ships. They don't just destroy, Ward said, his voice low and bitter. They consume. Everything they touch: technology, biology, even energy. They assimilate it, adding it to themselves. Every battle makes them stronger, every loss on our part is a gain for them. Thalvak's claws dug into the armrests of his chair as he struggled to process what he was seeing. The Voidborn weren't just enemies, they were an extinction event. A force of nature that consumed and evolved, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. How did you survive? He asked, his voice hoarse. Ward's jaw tightened. We didn't. That footage was from our first encounter with the Voidborn, 70 years ago. We lost 3 fleets in a matter of days. Entire colonies were wiped out before we even understood what we were dealing with. By the time we regrouped, they were gone, vanished back into the void as quickly as they had appeared. Thalvak turned to face the Admiral, his golden eyes blazing with urgency. And you think they'll return? Ward nodded grimly. It's not a question of if, Commander. It's a question of when. The signals we've been picking up, the ones that led us to the wreckage, they've been growing stronger. More frequent. The Voidborn are waking up, and when they come back, they won't stop until they've consumed everything. The Zealary commander stared at the screen, his mind racing. The footage continued to play, showing other encounters with smaller Voidborn entities. Each one was a nightmare made flesh, their forms as varied as they were horrifying. Some resembled massive serpents, their bodies coiled with living metal. Others were sprawling masses of tendrils and spines, their movements fluid and alien. But the most terrifying thing wasn't their size or their power. It was their intelligence. They are not mindless, Thalvak said, his voice trembling with realization. They are calculating. Ward nodded. They learn. They adapt. Every strategy we've used against them, every weapon we've deployed, they've found ways to counter it. That's why we've been fortifying our borders, building ships like the Resolute. We're trying to stay ahead of them, but it's a race we're losing. Thalvak's gaze dropped to the floor, his thoughts a chaotic swirl of fear and disbelief. The Zealary had always viewed humanity as reckless, a fledgling species playing with fire. But now, he saw the truth. Humanity wasn't reckless, they were desperate. Desperate to survive against an enemy that defied comprehension. What about the rest of the galaxy? He asked finally. Why haven't you told anyone? Ward's expression darkened. Because no one would believe us. The Concord would dismiss it as human paranoia. The Zealary would see it as an opportunity to exploit our weakness. And even if they did believe us, they wouldn't understand the threat. Not until it was too late. Thalvak's claws flexed, his mind racing. The Voidborn weren't just humanity's problem, they were a threat to the entire galaxy. And yet, humanity had been left to face them alone, their warnings ignored, their sacrifices unseen. Why are you showing me this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ward turned to him, his blue eyes filled with a quiet determination. Because we can't do this alone. If the Voidborn return, it's going to take more than humanity to stop them. We need allies. We need you, Commander. Thalvak froze, the weight of the Admiral's words pressing down on him like a physical force. The Zealary had always viewed themselves as the apex of galactic civilization, their superiority unquestioned. But now, faced with the reality of the Voidborn, Thalvak realized how fragile that superiority truly was. I'll take this back to the Dominion, he said finally, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. But I can't promise they'll listen. Ward nodded, his expression grim but resolute. Just make them understand, Commander. Because if we fail, if we don't stand together, then the Voidborn will consume us all. As the footage ended, the room fell into silence once more. But the images lingered in Thalvak's mind, their horror etched into his memory. The Voidborn were coming, and the galaxy was woefully unprepared. And deep down, Thalvak feared that even with humanity's preparations, it still wouldn't be enough. The Grand Chamber of the Zealary Council was a place of awe and intimidation. Towering columns of crystalline material rose high into the domed ceiling, refracting light into shimmering rainbows that danced across the polished floor. The air was thick with the weight of history and authority, a silent reminder of the countless decisions that had shaped the course of the Zealary Dominion for millennia. Thalvak stood at the center of the chamber, his golden eyes scanning the semicircle of counselors seated before him. Their robes, adorned with intricate patterns of silver and violet, marked their status as the highest leaders of the Dominion. Their faces, sharp and angular, betrayed little emotion, but Thalvak could feel the tension in the room like a storm brewing in the distance. He took a deep breath, clutching the data crystal in his clawed hand. This was the moment he had prepared for, the moment he had dreaded. He had seen the truth with his own eyes, but now he had to make them see it too. The evidence is clear, Thalvak began, his voice steady but filled with urgency. The Voidborn are real. I've seen the footage. I've heard the accounts. Humanity isn't fabricating this threat, they are fighting to survive against something far beyond any of us. A murmur rippled through the chamber, some of the counselors whispering to one another. Others remained silent, their expressions cold and skeptical. One of them, Counselor Valar, leaned forward, his silver eyes narrowing. And yet, Commander, you bring us this warning on behalf of humanity, a species known for its recklessness and deceit. How do we know this isn't another ploy? A desperate attempt to draw us into their conflicts. Thalvak's jaw tightened, his spines bristling with frustration. This is no ploy, Counselor. The footage I've brought speaks for itself. He inserted the data crystal into the console before him, and the chamber darkened as a holographic display flickered to life. The images of the Voidborn filled the air, their massive, shifting forms casting eerie shadows across the counselors' faces. The sounds of destruction, the screams, the explosions, the unearthly roars echoed through the chamber, sending chills down even the most hardened among them. When the footage ended, silence fell over the room. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the faint hum of the holographic projector. Grand Chancellor Zeldar, seated at the highest point of the semicircle, finally spoke. His voice was deep and resonant, carrying the weight of his authority. What you have shown us is troubling. But it does not prove that humanity's claims are entirely truthful. What if these Voidborn are merely a fabrication? A weapon of their own design, meant to frighten us into submission? Thalvak stepped forward, his voice rising with conviction. Do you truly believe that, Chancellor? Look at what you've seen. No species, not even humanity, could create something like this. The Voidborn don't negotiate. They don't conquer. They consume. They leave nothing behind but ruin and silence. And if we don't act, if we don't unite, then we will all be devoured, Zealary and human alike. His words hung in the air, raw and unyielding. Some of the counselors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their doubt beginning to waver. Others still looked unconvinced, their expressions hardened by centuries of mistrust toward humanity. Counselor Valar sneered, his voice sharp. And what would you have us do, Thalvak? Throw the full might of the Dominion behind humanity's war machine? Sacrifice our resources, our people, for the sake of a species that has done nothing but sow chaos since it emerged from its cradle? Thalvak turned to face him, his golden eyes blazing. I would have us survive, Counselor. I would have us fight for the future of our galaxy, for the lives of our people. The Voidborn don't care who we are or what we've done. To them, we are nothing but fuel. If we stand divided, we will fall, one by one, until there is nothing left but ash and silence. The chamber erupted into heated debate, the counselors' voices overlapping in a chaotic cacophony. Some argued in favor of Thalvak, their voices ringing with fear and determination. Others dismissed his warnings, their mistrust of humanity blinding them to the greater threat. Thalvak felt a surge of frustration, his claws curling into fists. He had seen the Voidborn. He had felt their presence, the cold, unrelenting hunger that radiated from them. How could they not understand? How could they not see the danger that loomed over them all? Enough! The single word cut through the noise like a blade, and the chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to Grand Chancellor Zeldar, who rose slowly from his seat. His gaze swept across the room, his expression unreadable. "Commander Thalvak," the Chancellor said, his voice calm but commanding. "You have risked much to bring us this warning. You have defied tradition, ventured into human space, and returned with evidence of a threat that could change the course of our history. For that, you have my respect." Thalvak inclined his head, his heart pounding in his chest. "But respect alone is not enough," Zeldar continued. "This council must decide whether to act on your warnings or dismiss them. And that decision cannot be made lightly." He paused, his gaze lingering on the holographic image of the Voidborn. For a moment, the chamber was silent once more, the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone present. Finally, the Chancellor spoke. "I have seen enough. The Zealary Dominion cannot afford to ignore this threat. If the Voidborn are real, as you claim, then they pose a danger not only to humanity but to all life in the galaxy. We will not stand idly by while the stars burn." Thalvak's breath caught, a flicker of hope igniting within him. Zeldar turned to the counselors, his voice firm. "The Dominion will ally with humanity. We will share this warning with the Galactic Concord and prepare for the battles to come. If the Voidborn return, we will face them together, as one galaxy united against the darkness." The chamber erupted once more, but this time, the voices were not of dissent but of resolve. Thalvak felt a surge of relief and determination as he stepped back, his mission finally accomplished. As the counselors debated the specifics of their alliance, Thalvak allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. The galaxy was awakening to the threat of the Voidborn. And with unity, perhaps there was a chance to stand against the darkness. The galaxy had changed. 5 years ago, the idea of unity among the fractured species of the Galactic Concord had been unthinkable. Centuries of mistrust, wars, and rivalries had carved deep scars into the fabric of civilization. But now, those scars were fading, replaced by something fragile yet powerful: hope. The Galactic Concord, once a symbol of bureaucracy and inefficiency, had become the heart of an unprecedented alliance. Humans, Zealary, and dozens of other species, each with their own histories of conflict, now stood side by side. The halls of Concord Station, a sprawling structure orbiting a dying star, buzzed with activity. Representatives of every species gathered in the grand chambers, their voices no longer raised in argument but in collaboration. Humanity had taken the lead, their desperation and experience driving the effort forward. They shared their technology freely, offering designs for ships like the Resolute. These vessels, built for adaptability and resilience, became the blueprint for the Galactic Armada. Zealary engineers refined the designs, integrating their crystalline energy systems, while the reptilian Karath added their plasma weaponry, and the insectoid Vern wove their organic armor into the hulls. Each species contributed something unique, creating ships that were not just tools of war but symbols of unity, a testament to what the galaxy could achieve when it stood together. Thalvak walked through the shipyards of Concord Prime, his sharp eyes scanning the massive vessels under construction. The air was filled with the hum of machinery and the voices of workers from dozens of species. He watched as a team of humans and Zealary worked together to install a new energy core, their movements synchronized despite their physical differences. It was a sight that filled him with both pride and unease. They were building weapons, preparing for a war unlike any the galaxy had ever known. But would it be enough? Later, in the quiet of the Resolute's observation deck, Thalvak found himself standing beside Admiral Ward. The human's face was lined with exhaustion, his once bright eyes shadowed by years of relentless preparation. "We've done everything we can," Ward said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "The ships, the defenses, the alliances. It's more than I ever thought we'd accomplish. But it doesn't feel like enough." Thalvak's gaze drifted to the stars beyond the viewport. They seemed so distant, so fragile against the vast darkness of space. "Because we're not just fighting a war," he said quietly. "The Voidborn are beyond war. They are beyond anything we've ever faced." Ward nodded, his expression grim. "We've prepared for battles, we understand ships, weapons, strategies. But the Voidborn, they are something else. Something ancient. Something that doesn't think like we do." Thalvak turned to face him, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "Then we must become something else as well. If we fight as we always have, we'll lose. But if we stand together, if we adapt as they do, perhaps we have a chance." The two stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared fears settling between them. Outside, the shipyards continued their work, the lights of the construction platforms flickering like distant fireflies. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy was united. But unity alone might not be enough to face the darkness that was coming. It began with a whisper. Across the galaxy, sensors picked up faint signals, disturbances in the fabric of space itself. At first, they were dismissed as anomalies, the echoes of dying stars or the remnants of ancient black holes. But then the signals grew louder, more distinct. Patterns emerged, unnatural and deliberate. And then the sky darkened. Above the planet of Kaldar Prime, where the Galactic Armada had gathered, the void itself seemed to ripple and tear. Massive rifts opened, spilling forth shadows that twisted and writhed like living things. The temperature dropped, and a suffocating stillness fell over the planet, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. The Voidborn had arrived. Their ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were vast, their hulls pulsating with a sickly, organic glow. Veins of bioluminescent light crisscrossed their surfaces, pulsing in time with some unholy rhythm. They moved with an eerie grace, their forms shifting and flowing as though they were alive. Some resembled monstrous leviathans, their tendrils stretching out like the arms of a predator. Others were jagged and angular, their shapes defying logic and reason. From the bridge of the Resolute, Thalvak and Ward watched in silence as the Voidborn fleet emerged. The air on the bridge was heavy, the tension palpable. Around them, officers from every species worked in unison, their voices steady despite the fear that gripped them all. "This is it," Ward said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a weight to his words, a finality that sent a chill down Thalvak's spine. "The fight for everything." Thalvak nodded, his gaze never leaving the viewport. "We've prepared for this moment. Now we see if it's enough." The Galactic Armada moved into position, thousands of ships forming a defensive line around Kaldar Prime. The combined fleets of humanity, Zealary, and countless other species stood ready, their weapons primed and their shields raised. The Resolute took its place at the center of the formation, its massive frame bristling with weaponry. But even as the fleet prepared for battle, doubts lingered. The Voidborn were not a conventional enemy. They didn't fight for territory or resources. They fought to consume, to devour everything in their path. The first shots were fired. Beams of energy and volleys of missiles streaked through the void, slamming into the Voidborn ships. For a moment, it seemed as though the attacks were having an effect. Explosions rippled across their surfaces, and pieces of their hulls shattered into the darkness. But then the Voidborn began to change. Their wounds closed with unnatural speed, the damaged sections of their bodies twisting and reforming into something stronger. The weapons that had struck them were absorbed, their designs assimilated and repurposed. The Voidborn retaliated, unleashing waves of energy that tore through the Galactic Armada's front lines, leaving nothing but debris in their wake. On the bridge of the Resolute, alarms blared as officers shouted orders. The ship shook under the impact of a Voidborn attack, but its shields held for now. Thalvek and Ward stood side by side, their expressions grim but resolute. They had known this battle would be unlike any other, but seeing the Voidborn in action was something else entirely. "They are adapting," Thalvek said, his voice tight. "Faster than we anticipated." Ward nodded, his jaw clenched. "Then we adapt faster. We have to." The Voidborn fleet continued its advance, their massive forms blotting out the stars. The Galactic Armada fought with everything it had, but the battle was far from over. As the Resolute fired its main cannon, sending a beam of energy slicing through the darkness, Ward turned to Thalvek. For a moment, their eyes met, and in that moment, there was no division between human and Zealary, only two beings fighting for survival. "This is it," Ward said again, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "The fight for everything." Thalvek nodded, his claws tightening around the console. "Then we fight." The screen faded to black as the first wave of Voidborn ships descended upon the Galactic Armada, their unholy forms consuming the light. The sound of weapons fire echoed in the darkness, a desperate symphony of survival. And then, silence.